Today we finally have a release date. Intel is completely falling apart, and Nvidia needs to be worried about AMD's next-gen GPUs, specifically ray tracing. Welcome everyone to GamerMelt. AMD's Ryzen 9000 series have been out for a little while now, but there's something that's still missing about this release, and that is their next-gen motherboards. These were actually announced right alongside the Ryzen 9000 CPUs, but shortly after, rumors came out that claimed the x670 boards wouldn't be released until after Ryzen 9000. That's obviously an odd one because when you release new CPUs, they typically release new chipsets, new motherboards right alongside them, so you can buy something new. Some motherboard manufacturers kind of have something new to sell with these new CPUs, but they were in fact delayed. Luckily, it looks like they're not too far off because, as you can see right here, it says Amazon confirms the release date of x870 motherboards. You can see this is a Gigabyte X870 Aorus Elite, and it actually says it will be released on September 30th. Basically, if this ends up being true, you should be able to get one of AMD's new motherboards very soon, though I don't really know if you're going to want to. As you'll notice here, this isn't even an X870E, and yet it's 328 euros. And from what we've seen from other listings overseas, as you can see, it says the X870 motherboards listed are starting at $350, with premium X870E models maybe close to $800. And if you remember, as far as what's new, well, it's really not a lot. USB 4.0 is standard on all of these motherboards, but current X670E motherboards have USB 4.0. Not all of them, but some certainly do. Then we have PCI Express Gen 5 on graphics and NVMe on all motherboards. So once again, there are currently some motherboards that already have that. Then we have higher AMD Expo memory clock support, which should help some, though if you haven't already seen my video on what happens with Ryzen 9000 after you get over 6,000 megatransfers per second, you may want to see that. But basically, if you haven't, what happens is after you get past 6,000 megatransfers per second, the memory controller clocks get cut in half. So you have to have memory speed significantly faster to really start seeing any kind of difference. If this does end up being true, I definitely suggest looking at an X670 or X670E motherboard instead. And next up for today, Intel is completely falling apart. If you've been following the channel, which of course, if you aren't, make sure you subscribe to GamerMeld and hit that bell icon so you can stay up to date on all the latest PC hardware news. But if you have, you know that, well, not too long ago, Intel cut 15,000 jobs. Then they seem to be in talks of selling their foundry division. And then most recently, Qualcomm was apparently reported to be exploring acquiring some pieces of their chip design business. And because of all of this, it looks like the US government may not be giving, or at least could be delaying, the funding from the CHIPS Act. Remember that this was funding set to bring chip manufacturing into the US. Well, as you can see right here, it says the $8.5 billion in CHIPS Act assistance intended for Intel from the US government is expected to be delayed due to the company's ongoing financial struggles. According to a Bloomberg report, the Department of Commerce rejected the initial allocation request, requiring Intel to meet specific objectives and complete a comprehensive due diligence process before the funds are released. And that's obviously understandable, especially with reports like this. I definitely was a little bit confused about this, but ultimately, it seems like every single day there's some new story out that is really bad news for Intel. And this is just yet another one of those showing just how much Intel is struggling. And next up, we have a huge story that really should kick both Nvidia and AMD into high gear. As you can see right here, it says the Chinese chipmaker Longsun has a new GPU on the way that blows its current gen GPU out of the water. According to a senior company executive speaking today, the upcoming Longsun 9A2000 will deliver performance that is 8 to 10 times that of its current gen GPU. Talk about a massive upgrade, though I will say when your starting point is so much lower, you can obviously get those really big upgrades from one generation to the next, but still, this is pretty impressive. As you can see right here, it says the machine translation suggests that the new 9A2000 is comparable to NVIDIA's GeForce RTX 2080. Now, obviously, that's still a couple generations behind, but still, that's a 2080. That's likely right around, say, today's RTX 4060's performance, which is, of course, a huge jump from their first 9A1000, given that one was set to be compared to around, I believe it was an RX 550. Basically, if AMD and NVIDIA don't look out, some of these new Chinese chip makers might actually be able to compete with them before too long. And that is, of course, why competition is great. And lastly for today, Sony just announced their PS5 Pro. And while I'll quickly sort of go over some of the specs and things like that, the main thing I want to focus on is their APU's integrated GPU. But before I get to that, we'll quickly kind of go over this. First up, as you can see, this is set to be available November 7th, so it is in fact releasing this year, but it's releasing at a pretty eye-watering $700. Not only that, but you might notice that this new system doesn't come with a disk drive. If you want one, well, you literally have to buy it separately. I don't know, it seems like a really weird decision, but let's get into the specs, or at least the performance here. As you can see, it says the console is said to be 45% faster with 67% more compute units and 28% faster RAM. Basically, it is fairly impressive. It is quite a bit faster, though I'm not really sure if it's enough to justify that price increase, but if you look at these and you've been following the channel, you may have noticed that this is something that was already revealed. And in fact, this was actually revealed months ago. You can see that rendering 45% faster. And then they mentioned 2 to 3 times ray tracing. And for that, we actually have a new article from CNET who was able to speak with Sony's own Mark Cerny. And in that, he actually states, quote, PS5 Pro uses the new advanced ray tracing feature sets that AMD created as the next step in their roadmap architecture. But if you look around, there are no other AMD GPUs that use it yet. We motivated the development, and I'm very happy we did so. The response from the developers has been extraordinarily great. And this is actually something that was discussed when this originally leaked. Basically, from what we had seen, AMD took some of RDNA 3, but then when it came to ray tracing, they took some from RDNA 4, which from this quote, it definitely sounds like that is the case, which also should mean, especially given how accurate they were on other parts of the specs, that we should actually get a 2 to 3 times ray tracing performance increase with AMD's next-gen GPUs, which could mean that AMD's RX 8000 series, while they won't be competing in the absolute high-end from everything that we've seen, they could actually not only compete with NVIDIA extremely well in ray tracing, with this, they may actually be able to beat them. So while that does it for today, does faster ray tracing, potentially even faster than NVIDIA, make you look more towards AMD's next-gen GPUs, or are you still sticking with NVIDIA? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you liked the video, please subscribe and give it a thumbs up. And as always, have a great day.